This is a People First Radio podcast.
A group of volunteers in Victoria are offering a listening ear as a way to help create community. Sidewalk Talk is a community listening project. On the second Saturday of every month, the Sidewalk Talk team head out in public. This winter, they're setting up in the courtyard of the library on Victoria's Broughton Street. Anyone interested can come and share. The goal is to help people feel heard and to help create connection. I spoke with the group's co-founder about what kinds of things people are sharing and the art of good listening.
My name is Bernice Rahm. I actually prefer B, and I have lived a great number of lives and identities. And in this particular context, I am the co-founder of Sidewalk Talk here in Victoria, and have been the person kind of creating a community listening project idea for the last year.
A community listening project idea. I understand that what that looks like is second Saturday of the month. You and a group of volunteers are out in public in Victoria, actively looking to listen to people. Can you tell me what that looks like on the ground?
Yeah, there's two things that I would want to say on that. There's the component of like who the volunteers are and how we create the culture amongst ourselves. And so the thing that we're offering as a practice to community is a thing that we're actively practicing. And then if you go back even further, it's a thing that I am actively practicing. So it starts with us showing up and listening to each other. Like, how are you arriving? What's going on for you? And that allows us to just have a little bit more space and capacity to be with this experience and whoever might come to us with whatever subject. And then again, at the very end of the listen, we do the same. It's like, what happened for you? Is there anything that you need to talk about? Anything you need to clear? And honestly, we do that in the middle. Then what we're just offering is we sit down with a smile on our face and a little sign that is like shaped like a speech bubble. And it says things like, when was the last time you've been listened to? Or free listening, no gimmicks. And we simply offer to hear what people have going on. And obviously that can range quite a bit, and I can go into that maybe later, but there's this feeling of people not quite knowing how to engage with us. This is a very foreign concept. And so there's an initial kind of like getting to know you chat that kind of happens every single time. And then people start to realize that, oh, we're serious and we're actually, what's going on? What would you like to talk about? And they'll like crack the door open and share a little bit about what's going on in their world.
I wanted to be sure to ask about that idea of how open people are to chatting. Sometimes I get the sense just walking around in public that if anyone is kind of actively seeking to talk to me, they're trying to sell me something or it's some kind of scam. It seems to be a thing that we've been conditioned to these days.
Yeah, absolutely. We get a lot of questions and a lot of resistance about like, what are you selling? Like, what religious affiliation do you have? And this particular thing. And so we very deliberately, a friend actually called us street level bodhisattvas. And that like really landed with me because we're just offering our presence. And so we're trying not to actually like solicit engagement. We're trying not to say, hey, and really pull people in. It's just honestly, hopefully like our presence and our smiles to pull people in. And then I guess on your question, there's people like general sweeping statement we've found don't necessarily know how to share in this context, or in some cases don't necessarily even have access to being able to share beyond kind of the information level, like the information level of like, this is what I do for work, this is what the weather is. And then underneath that is like how you feel about these things. And even like thoughts, beliefs, feelings around what's going on in your world. And so it can feel quite foreign because of that.
What kinds of things do you find when people do open up or do take the opportunity to chat? What are they often chatting about?
We've listened in several locations, mostly in the downtown, and there's a very wide kind of like diversity of humans that we've talked to. And so we've had people tell us about how their partner's in the hospital and they're not going to come out. And what does that mean for, this plan that they had for their life? And what's next? How they're caregivers for like so many people, and they're kind of putting their life on hold because they're caregiving. That was actually two separate contexts. We've had people talk about, like, from a lot of different angles, we've had people talk about difficulty in finding community, difficult in finding like friends and people to talk to. We do have listeners who listen in other language. And so one of our Spanish speaking listeners actually had a pretty long conversation with someone who just wanted to talk in Spanish because it wasn't really something that they had access to yet. So like newcomers, in that context, and also I don't even want to say older people in the context of loneliness. It's far beyond that. And I don't even want to say like single people. It's far beyond that. You can be sitting next to someone on the couch and for every single night and still feel lonely, because the difference between being alone and lonely is being seen and heard. And there's something that's happened in our society and culture with the way that we've been programmed that we don't quite understand how to be with people, to just see and hear them. We've had this programming of, when I want to help you, I want to like fix you, I want to like, oh, this is your problem, let me tell you what to do. And that actually prevents someone from feeling the relief of just being like acknowledged and validated and seen.
How do you process some of the things that people share with you? If someone, for example, comes and shares, my partner is in the hospital, they're not going to come out, and now I don't know what's going to happen with my life plan. As the volunteer listener on the other side coming out and spending a few hours on your Saturday, how do you sit with that?
So this is why I refer to it as a listening practice, part of the reason. And it's also very much why I am like holding down the fort of this being a community. We need to have each other's back out there. We listen to each other beforehand to make sure that we have enough capacity to be there. If someone has a difficult listen, and difficult listen could be anything that lands in me that touches something that's going on for me. And quite honestly, that's like almost all of them, because chances are the person sitting in front of me is going to say something that's going to land for me, and then I'll be with it in some way. So if I'm not able to be with what was there, or even if I can, it's still like a beautiful practice to just share with someone, oh, this person said this thing to me, and it's actually sitting there as like quite sad, or it's hitting this aspect of my life. So in the middle of a listen, it's actually quite common for us to get up from our listening spot, look around at the other listeners, and ask if they'll listen to us in that moment. And so we'll exchange that. And then at the very end, we do the same thing, and then it extends past the container. We have continual communication, and if someone needs some sort of, attention, listening, we're there.
Who are the volunteer listeners? How did people come to be in this community?
Right. So I facilitate a practice called authentic relating, and learning how to be in presence with someone and just listen and reflect back is like a tiny component of that. And so a lot of the volunteers have experienced me as a facilitator and came from that direction. And the thing that I'm constantly emphasizing in authentic relating is it's one thing to come into, my Sunday night circle and to experience this with strangers and oh my gosh, this feels like relief. This feels so amazing. I feel so seen and heard. I feel so connected. And then you head out into your life and your life is completely the same. And so the way that I approach all of this is I call it the wild, like your life is the wild, and it's harder in the wild. It's harder to do these practices. And so I'm constantly trying to bridge the gap to bringing these feelings that are fairly easy to create in authentic relating, of feeling seen and heard and connected. How can we create those feelings in the wild? So the idea is this pod of people practice it in our lives, we practice it together, and then we practice it with strangers. And the hope is that, not only us practicing this kind of creates a ripple in our own lives, but perhaps the person being listened to can actually feel what it feels like to be seen and heard, because there's quite a relief in that. And then maybe that inspires them to listen to somebody else.
You're listening to People First Radio. I'm Joe Pugh. My guest is Bernice Rahm. She's co-founder of a Sidewalk Talk program in Victoria. Once a month, volunteers spend time outside, ready to hear from anyone in need of a listening ear. According to their Instagram bio, the group practices heart-centered listening to promote connection, belonging, and inclusion, and to enhance social health. It was kind of coming through in some of the stories you shared that people have shared with the listeners. But what do you think you have learned about the wild and society as a whole from this project?
Yeah, there's definitely like a common thread of humanity. I think what's standing out in this moment for me is that everyone has like a certain amount of capacity, and that capacity is affected, like we're in human bodies, that capacity is affected by what we eat, how much we sleep, who's around us, how many hugs we've had, whether or not someone's even said hi to us. And there are a lot of people out there right now whose capacity is quite tapped. And there's just a lot of things going on that we're kind of consuming, and it's hard to kind of get away and maybe just like live in the trees long enough to feel resourced enough to handle what's going on around us. Like even in our own like little bubbles, what's going on around us.
Is there anything you think that maybe you have learned about the art of listening that you think is a transferable skill that you can share with me or anyone who's listening on the radio that they could take away as a nugget from this and maybe incorporate into their own lives?
Yeah, listening is a practice. It's not a take a class one and done and you're an expert. Like, here's the thing. I think the entry place for me is to find some part of the practice that appeals to you, something that, someone has said, a way that they have, been curious or something like this, or a way that they've acknowledged, and then just practice that. And if it feels awkward, my favorite thing is transparency. And so if something feels awkward, you can say, I'm trying something new and it feels a little awkward, but do you mind if I try like acknowledging and validating what you just said? Or do you mind if I try just reflecting back a little bit of what I heard?
How do you think people can go about thinking about maybe that transition from what you were talking about of if it's true that there's a default, someone shares something they're going through, my immediate response is, I want to fix that, or have you tried blank? How do you think you can make that shift if that's something you notice yourself doing and you want to try maybe doing that instead? I'm going to just listen to what you said and sit with it and try and validate it.
It's just about the noticing. The entry point is the noticing. And from my own journey, the most important thing is to not beat myself up about what I start to notice, because that adds an extra layer that just makes it way harder. So it's like, oh, I did the thing again. Oh, I did the thing again. And then maybe there's like a little bit more space gets added. And honestly, this is a practice that takes like quite a long period of time. There's in like there's a different context between like being with your friends and actually being in a scenario where you need to deeply listen. And so they're two different things. But if I'm in a scenario where I need to deeply listen, and even if it's a friend situation, I'd love to be asked and then I'll just transition. Piggybacking is kind of like a bad thing. So it's like, oh, my grandma just died. Oh, mine did too. And then it becomes about me, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing when we're building connection and rapport, but it's a bad thing if somebody wants to like just be deeply heard. And so when I notice that I've done something, I notice how it feels to me. And it feels like, oh dear God, I shouldn't have done it in that moment. That feels gross. Then it's just honestly being honest with myself, noticing that I want to not do that, maybe even getting brave and saying, hey, I just did the thing. I don't want to do that thing. And just like slowly walking yourself into like a new practice.
This project, I think, to me from the outside, highlights kind of different layers of community that are out there. Like there's the community of you, the group of people who are volunteer listening, and you have debriefs with each other. You have pre-briefs, if that's fair to say, with each other. There's the community that's created when you and a person you've never met before are having this conversation. And then there's maybe the whole wider community of people in Victoria, people in the world, whatever. What do you think you've learned about maybe each of those distinct communities?
I've been kind of like playing with and living kind of relational practices, different versions of relational practices for several years now. And one of the things that I've come to discover is we have a bit of a wonky understanding of the word community. It has become kind of synonymous a little bit with like go somewhere, pay for a thing, and then leave. So, go to breath work, pay for breath work, and oh, I'm part of the breath work community, and then you leave. And that really didn't land for me because it didn't translate into my life. And so my idea of community really solidified when I heard that there needs to be an exchange of doing things for each other. There needs to be some sort of, like, for example, the way I'm practicing it in my life right now, I absolutely love it when someone says, hey, I'm painting my living room. Do you want to come help? I'm like, yes, I absolutely do want to help. And then it's like, hey, I'm moving this heavy thing. Do you want to come help? Absolutely, I want to come help. And so in the micro aspects of our life, it's actually being with each other in tangible, practical ways to help us actually live our lives. One of my friends cleaned my microwave for me because they realized I was too short to reach in and do it. Like, this feels like community to me. And when we kind of go out in these circles of relationship further and further away from our core people, and we get to this thing that we call community, then how can we actually still exchange kind of energy in the same way? And so there's simple things like smiles, kindness, opening a door, these very simple practices that I think a lot of us are kind of like turning toward, realizing that they're not actually small.
How do you think someone makes the transition from community as a thing where I go and I meet the same people and we all pay to do some activity together and then we leave, to you have cleaned my microwave for me? Is it just a matter of becoming friends with the people you do with shared activities, or is there something beyond that that helps with that?
Right. You're asking me to summarize what I've been doing for the last 3 years. It's quite a process. Not every single person out there that you meet in a container can be your best buddy, even if it's a shared activity that you both absolutely adore. And so finding community is kind of like, it's finding your people, and that involves this really vulnerable practice of taking risks and asking for the thing that you might need or want. So when I say to my friends, hey, I would really love for you to invite me over next time you paint your living room, it actually can be like quite edgy and challenging that for them to ask for help, even though they know that I might want that. So it's about kind of like intentionally being brave in really gentle and sweet ways.
And I guess coming full circle going back to the listening project, oftentimes it sounds like in that moment when someone is coming up and talking to a listener, it's almost like an invitation to be that, I'm going to use the phrase, microwave cleaning friend for just a moment that might not be there for them right now.
Yeah. I'll give one example of that happened last December. It was the first time that we were listening at the library. And for context, this is not what we're doing. We're not social workers. We're not there to help and fix and change. But there was this, we're trained to watch for when people circle through the space multiple times, because it could mean that they're wanting to engage and they don't know how. And so it was the very end of our listen, and we were all pretty cold. And this guy had circled through multiple times. He had a very large backpack on, and I was standing in the center of the courtyard, and he just turned toward me. I was just standing there with a smile on my face and the sign, and he turned toward me and he said, "Do you have any resources for someone who has just become homeless today?" And in that moment, like, just reality kind of clicked in. We're standing there, we're offering listening, and that isn't what this person needed. And so there's this like micro kindness of, I just asked the other volunteers, does anyone know what we can do? We have these resource cards. And so someone just like spent a little bit of time with him, telling him what he knew about the resources, and ended up getting him a bed and a meal. And that is not what we're doing, but that is like a micro kindness that kind of came out of it.
And I find that very interesting, given that we spent a decent chunk of our conversation talking about the idea of like listening isn't offering people solutions. And then sometimes people can open up and ask for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's about discernment in the moment. Like, I'm not going to fix your life. I'm not going to tell you, what you're doing wrong. But if you're a human and I'm a human and you hit at that level of reality, I don't want to turn away.
Bernice Rahm is the co-founder of Sidewalk Talk in Victoria. The group will be outside in the courtyard of the Central Victoria Library on Broughton Street on the second Saturday of every month until at least the spring.
People First Radio, People First Media, and People First Stories are community media projects of Vancouver Island Mental Health Society and are produced in Nanaimo, British Columbia. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of Vancouver Island Mental Health Society or its broadcast, podcast, and social media partners.